So you've installed your high tunnel, and now you're trying to figure out your irrigation system. Most of the time, people recommend that you go to a supply shop that provides all of those drip irrigation fittings and hoses and all of those things. We like to do disruptive technology and do things with what we already have on the farm. So if you want to see what we're doing and you want to see how our experiment's going to go, hang around. Hey y'all, this is Doug.
And Melissa Hoffman with Mesquite Field Farm. We're one of two mentor farms with the AgriBility Battleground to Breaking Ground program. And we like to do videos to show you guys how we farm on our little 20-acre farm out here. So if you like the video and like what you see, please give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel to see when we upload new videos.
So today we're going to talk about high tunnels, right? So you built this high tunnel and you've got it all in place and you're ready to go. And the very next thing you start thinking about is I'm ready to get plants in the ground. But you really have to focus on how am I going to water those plants, right? So before you put your beds in, start tilling the soil, you've got to figure out how you're going to water that once you have it in place. And a lot of people follow the traditional high tunnel model, which is I'm going to go get some drip irrigation lines and all those fittings that all the high tunnel manufacturers and the supply houses for them want you to believe that you have to buy.
I have a question about that.
Okay.
Do the same people who manufacture the high tunnels manufacture the drip irrigation?
Yes.
Or do they have like relationships with those companies? Is that part of the reason why they do that?
Well, it's all of the above, right?
Okay.
So some of the big high tunnel manufacturers have a different company that's owned by the parent company that sells all the fittings.
Got it. Okay.
Drip tape. And
so it's probably part of the reason why you see a lot of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
And there are some that have relationships, just like any other market, right? So there are partnerships and relationships created, but we really try to do things. I mean, the way to make money on a farm is to not spend it. That's the first way. So cost avoidance is the first way to do it. So our intention is to always use, if we can, what we have on site. And since we've never done a high tunnel before, and I went out online and sat through some certification programs for high tunnel production that were put on by land-grant universities. And during that certification course, there were three universities. Two of them were traditional high tunnel growers, so they follow all of those traditional models. Go buy this drip irrigation tape, go buy these specialized products. That's how you're going to grow in a tunnel. The third one didn't follow the traditional model, and as we went through the class, they started talking about problems they were experiencing. And the traditional guys that were using traditional irrigation systems for high tunnels were experiencing heavy salt deposits coming to the surface of the soil. And they were, of course, once you have salt and your soil goes south, the insects come in to predate everything, so we're having predation problems. That third university completely did, their model was completely like I would like to do things on our farm, or the way that I think our farm is, right? We're more regenerative. So they had sprinkler systems in that put heavy amounts of water on the soil and allowed those salts to be washed deep into the earth rather than coming to the surface. And because those salts weren't present, they didn't have the insect predation. They also rotated their crops from bed to bed, and they planted cover crops. So one section of the tunnel would lay fallow for a season, filled with cover crops, providing the nutrients back into the soil that they were depleting with the previous crop. So, go ahead.
When you say sprinkler systems, are you talking about coming up from the ground sprinkler systems like the ones that we used to use in the gardens, or is this a different system that they used?
They had two types. They did both surface mounted, where they mounted them on a board or some type of rail system or the PVC pipe just laid across the ground. And they also had some that they suspended from the ceiling.
Did they find any big significant difference between those two ways of doing it?
Not in their tunnel that they described.
Just as long as there's a sprinkler and flooding.
Right, putting a lot of water on the soil instead of just in a particular space, right? So their harvest rates were significant. They didn't say that their harvest rates were any worse or any better than anyone else's, but they said they were consistent and they didn't have predation.
That kind of makes sense, though, because if you notice when you're out in pastures or whatnot, where you see salt buildups is places where there is a drip situation. There's small amounts of water going into one spot. You don't see a lot of salt deposits in places that get a lot of rain or runoff or something like that.
Yeah, not in our soil.
Maybe that's physics. I don't know.
Well,
but
it may just be here, right? So on our farm, where we see salt deposits is where cows have removed the cover on the soil. So those salts just bake through the surface, or water drips in a particular spot, a constant drip, then you get those salt deposits that move to the top.
Okay, sorry.
So their model in their tunnel actually matched how our farm works and looks, right? So I saw it as a very symbiotic process and said, well, let's try that model, but let's take it one step further. I don't want to have to go to the store and spend $1,000 on drip line
Not
fittings.
that we could anyway.
And even if I could, I don't think that I'd want to. But so we want to use things that we already have on the farm. So I talked to a good friend of ours, David. He's also a military veteran who was coming out here and helping on the farm. And he's got his own setup in San Antonio. But he came out and we started discussing it. And he's like, man, why don't we just set up a ceiling grid like you would see in a commercial building for a drop ceiling? So we started looking at that and evaluating that process, and yeah, we actually could. So I needed an 8-foot clearance all the way through the center of the tunnel to allow the tractor to come in with a headache bar up. So when we started looking at the purlins that are in the top of the tunnel, we realized we could run wires across the purlins to the arches at every arch and create that grid. So we used high tensile wire that you would use for electric fencing that we had plenty of on hand. And we used ratchets that you would use also for that high tensile wire to tighten and loosen it. So we've gone up at each purlin and installed the high tensile wire, ratcheted it tight. We skipped every other purlins where we put the ratchets, so it wasn't as expensive. But we noticed that we also gained rigidity when we did that. So it's actually helping hold the tunnel more rigid. It doesn't sway as much, and it's putting pressure across the arch with the purlins, which are all bolted and clamped in, but it reduces the movement even more. It just locks it all together.
Extra security.
A little extra. So we shot a video, and that video we're going to add to this, where I went out and showed you what those wires look like, the ratchets looks like. And we're using black polyline, right? We had so much of that on the farm for livestock watering. When we started, we didn't have underground buried PVC taking water from our pump house out to each pasture. We actually ran above ground black polyline all over this farm.
For years.
And we still have some large pieces out there.
Yes, we do.
Well, it allows us to modify our paddocks and shift our pastures around. We just piped the water to the gate of each one, and that made it simple.
Go from there.
So we still have a significant amount of black polyline. So we decided we'd do an experiment, and we would set up half of the tunnel and create the first 2 zones in the tunnel on irrigation on a 4-hose manifold with timers, so that we can manage the flow to zone 1 and zone 2 and see how it works. And if we get all of that to work right in the next 2 weeks, then during that 2 weeks, we'll go ahead and install zone 3 and 4, and we'll have the whole tunnel irrigated with irrigation systems built in for about $150. So it's
awesome.
Yeah, it'd be great, and we didn't go through a lot of expense to do it. And I haven't seen anyone else do it. Doesn't mean they haven't.
Not exactly this way, but it's still mimicking the way that university was doing it.
Correct.
But we're just using, I mean, these are all things that you could get easily from Home Depot or
right. And this time of the year, right? This time of the year, they have that black polyline, 100 foot of it, 50-foot rolls, 100-foot rolls for under $50. Yeah. So then you're just looking at the connectors and the sprinkler heads. So you're looking at maybe 12 sprinkler heads, maybe, and that's with 2 spares. Awesome. So yeah, I look forward to showing you the finished product over the next couple of weeks, and we'll see where we go from there.
Awesome. Well, let's go take a look at that now.
So for the irrigation system, we decided to try some disruptive technology and take, rather than following the traditional path of buying the drip irrigation systems that everyone was talking about, we decided we would try utilizing what we already had on the farm, right? So in our tunnel, we went ahead and hung some high tensile wire using high tensile ratchets, just like you would for electric fencing for horses. So we put those ratchets across, and ran the wire across from purlin to purlin, and just wrapped them on the other end. And then suck those things tight, which, putting that pressure on the purlins gave us some additional rigidity to the tunnel that we didn't have before. So we're doing it basically like a ceiling grid. So we ran one across here, and then we skipped an arch and ran to the next one. And we went to this arch. We're gonna put a ratchet in on this one. So every other one, we're putting a ratchet on to suck those purlins tight against each other and keep this grid across the top like you would find a ceiling grid in an office space. And then we took our black poly line, which we have a lot of on the farm. We utilize black poly for water, getting water out to the livestock for about the first 6 years we were on the property. So we run trunk lines for zone A or zone 1. That's the trunk line for it. And then zone 2, the trunk line is on the other side. And now we'll come inside of these and cut these lines in the center, right on this purlin, and hang black poly line straight down with the sprinkler head on it that will cover this whole either 180 or 360 degree. These are adjustable sprinkler heads, and they'll cover our bed space on both sides. Since we are doing an experiment, we're only going to run it through the first half of the tunnel for the test with a 4-hose manifold or a 4-zone manifold and timers, and make sure that everything works. If everything works as we plan, we'll continue with line 3 and 4 down on that end of the tunnel, and we will have put an irrigation system in with timers for about $150. Well, now that we've shown you the video of our intended disruptive technology, we're going to provide a follow-up video to this and show you the finished product in a couple of weeks. We should have USDA out here filming inside of that tunnel. So we'll shoot that video and we'll show you what it looks like when they're here.
Awesome.
Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. That's all we have for you today. We'll see you next time. Bye. Bye.